So, let's talk about... Oh, shut up! So, back in 2021, I talked about Mary Sue characters in this video. What the fuck? While it's not a home run, I like to think that video did well enough on its own, but it's been almost 2 years since that video. I've talked about various characters, topics, and tropes, and I honestly think now is a good time as any to talk about an older topic, this time around with a new fresh coat of paint. I mean, come on, what better way to start off the year than a video talking about bad writing? Oh, my life is miserable. Hi, I'm MangaKamen and welcome to my hell. We're talking about Mary Sue. Before we start the video proper, I want to clarify a few things. The first is that I still stand by my original video. I think Korra from Legend of Korra has traits of a Mary Sue, Rey from Star Wars is a Mary Sue, and Giovanni Giorgio, well, he's grown on me, but still has traits of a Gary Stu. The thing is, Gary Stu, Mary Sue, whatever, has become such a watered-down term nowadays. Now, a lot of terms that we use in the modern day have become so diluted that they lost their meaning. These buzzwords and literary aspects get tossed around by dopes like me on the internet so much just so we can get the best win against other people. It is tiring. So, to combat this, we need to give what I believe to be a Mary Sue a proper definition. Not only so you people can understand where I'm coming from, but also so we can be on the same page. A Mary Sue is a character that is seen as too perfect and almost boring for a lack of flaws, originally written as an idealized version of an author in fanfiction. Now, I could take the boring YouTuber route and talk about the origins of a Mary Sue, how it was originally from Star Trek fanfiction, but that to me just is tired and really annoying. Come on, if you're watching a video about Mary Sues, you probably already know about the history of them. So let's talk about a few conceptions and misconceptions of Mary Sues. The first is this.
I don't buy the Mary Sue thing anyway. I find the term sexist in itself because it's Mary Sue. I don't think there's a thing called Ryan Craig.
While yes, the term did indeed originate from a female character and can widely apply to a majority of female characters, that doesn't mean that male characters can't also be Mary Sues. As I've alluded, they already have a term called Gary Stu or Marty Stew, or whatever iteration have you. I do not view the term as sexist, mostly because we're talking about fictional characters, and frankly,
she's not real!
But I am real! As real as your love for each other.
But also there have been many male characters who have been lambasted in the past for being called Mary Sues, or the male equivalent. Allow me to sing you the ballad of Kirito from Sword Art Online. I'm not actually going to do that because I actually care about my sanity. The truth is, Mary Sue is a universal term, but at the same time, it's devolved to talk about characters that people just don't like. I will also say that saying something like, I've never heard a male character be called a Gary Stu raises a red flag to me. I think you need to step out of your little bubble and look. For years, in a simple Google search will have people discuss many characters be described as Gary Stews. Hell, I've even seen people argue that Goku from Dragon Ball Z is a Gary Stu, with such reasons as no flaws and no personality, be faster than the speed of light, eat carrots and be overpowered? What? Quick reminder for the people in the back, this is not my opinion. This is me explaining that there are people who claim this. Hell, there was an image for years that showed the holy trinity of Gary Stews, and you can find a lot of Gary Stews in anime, by the way. My point is, if you do a simple Google search, you'll find plenty of people explaining why insert character is a Gary Stew. Saying you've never heard anyone use the term or explain why a male character is one either shows that you didn't do any research to challenge your beliefs, that you're just being introduced to this massive thing we call the internet, or you're just being dishonest. Here we go, Kamen, you've lit the match, time to light this candle. I go back to my old example of Korra. Now, I do not like Korra as a character, and I'm obviously going to say that she certainly has traits of that of a Mary Sue.
I'm the Avatar! You gotta deal with it!
But having some traits of a Mary Sue does not make you a Mary Sue. I explain more in my original video as to my thoughts on the matter, so if you want more thoughts on that, there you go, link in the pinned comment. Sticking with Korra, a Mary Sue is seen as flawless. Anyone who has ever seen the show knows for a fact that Korra certainly ain't flawless. A lot of the issues that lead to Korra's unlikability on the internet stems from her personality being brash and rather egotistical at times. The shoddy and almost non-existent character development she has, and how at times the writers kinda pulled stuff out of their asses just to make her have a win. Now, agree or disagree all you like. I certainly know that even years later, the Korra fanbase is still chomping at the bit, but these are just reasons that I've seen given on the net and condensed down to a bite-sized form. Do I agree? Somewhat, but I find them to be a little bit dismissive of the development that Korra did get. I will say, Korra is a pretty hard character for me to like though. A common defense that people will like to bring up is that Korra is realistic. Now, my friends, my buddies, my guys, I need to point out something. Just because something is portrayed realistically, that does not mean it is good writing, nor does it justify any issues a person may have with said writing. Even if something is truly realistic to our lives, how it's portrayed, how it's paced, and how it's written can detract from it greatly. But let's take a step back and talk about a character I commonly be seen labeled as a Mary Sue and test the waters of that, shall we?
You were hurt, yes, but the intruder had made a critical mistake. He pissed you off.
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, the most anime of anime out there. For many years, there have been a lot of claims about the series, some good, some bad, and some that just... woof.
The characters are whack. Calm, cool guy. Calm, cool guy. Calm, cool guy. Funny cowards.
Funnily enough, we'll be talking about Jotaro Kujo, the main lead of Part 3 of the series, Stardust Crusaders. He's also probably one of the most iconic JoJo main leads, arguably. If you're not familiar with Jotaro Kujo, in Part 3 he's a 17-year-old Japanese-American delinquent with a terrible attitude, even to the point where he tells his mother to shut up. He also has an ability called a stand, named Star Platinum, which is essentially a psychic power given a manifestation that can only be seen by other stand users.
ジョジョの世界に登場するスタンドとは人間が引き出す精神的エネルギーが具現化したものでスタンド使いの背後から人物化時には物質化して出現このスタンドは使い手によって形や能力が異なりその能力によっては動いたり攻撃したりするものであるスタンドとスタンド使いは一心同体であるためスタンドが傷つけば使い手もダメージを食らうジョジョを象徴する能力なのだ
Now, I'm not gonna hold your hand. I am expecting some familiarity with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and the rest of the subjects I'm talking about today. I will explain some events, but I'm not gonna explain everything. This is not a JoJo-focused video. Maybe for down the line, but not today. So let's consider the 3 signs to look for when considering if a character should or shouldn't be considered a Mary Sue. 1. He is perfect. There is no struggle in his character at all. 2. He is a wish fulfillment character of the author. 3. He is also treated as an angel or savior from the other characters. I believe we can immediately discount the second one. In an interview, mangaka Araki has stated a very important fact about Jotaro.
いやー素晴らしいです。ですね、私は本当に荒木先生のジョジョの奇妙な冒険、丈太郎様と結婚したいという目標がありますので、ぜひ荒木先生に今日は突撃していろんなことを。
Oh my god! Sorry, wrong interview. There's actually an interview where Araki talks about how JoJo was born, per se. He cites people like Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger, stoic and muscular characters. One look at Araki and his characters, I think it's more safe to say that it's not a self-insert or wish fulfillment. Especially when we consider the fact that Jotaro is the third protagonist and is a very different character from Jonathan and Joseph. So let's look at 1 and 3, starting with he is perfect, there is no struggle in his character at all. Oftentimes, Jotaro is the character who solves the issues against the enemy stand users. Even to the point where Star Platinum develops powers and abilities that seemingly come out of nowhere. Some examples are that of Star Finger, sucking up justice, and of course Jotaro gaining Dio's time stop ability to help defeat him. Now I would counter that it ignores Jotaro's losses as well as how he's essentially unable to help in the situation multiple times. A perfect example is the encounter with Steely Dan. Now, yes, Jotaro does deliver a beatdown to the jackass that is Steely Dan. Oh, it's so satisfying. However, thanks to Dan's own stand ability, Jotaro's grandfather Joseph was turned into his hostage, and Jotaro had to rely on the abilities of his friends to save him, especially considering that Jotaro was the target of Steely Dan, so he couldn't do much either until his friends did their job. If Jotaro was a perfect character, he would have developed a new power for every situation, especially abilities that weren't really established that he could do beforehand.
You will remove these restraints and leave this cell with the door open.
I will remove these restraints and leave the cell with the door open.
To address the actual aspects of Jotaro's abilities, stands are metaphysical aspects. Throughout Part 3, stands have been established to go through physical objects or change sizes. We ought to consider that in Part 3 as well, there was the first part of JoJo where stands were introduced. The rules weren't as established as in the other part of the series, and experimentation is something that will happen, especially in a work like manga, where editorial mandates and such have a bigger impact on what can happen with a story. Even Jotaro's time stop ability was hinted at in a more recent anime adaptation, where Endul gets punched and there's a distortion similar to that of Dio when he activates the world. There is also a theory that Jotaro used the time stop ability unconsciously at the beginning of the story to bring stuff to his cell, but as I've stated before in other videos, theories are just that. Without confirmation, they don't really matter. Back to the matter at hand, Jotaro is constantly put at odds when fighting against his enemies, and while yes, he does beat up the bad guys, to claim that they're just easy fights is kinda dumb. Most of his confrontations require him to have some sort of strategy to win because he's at a disadvantage. In the fight against Tower of Grey, he was severely outmatched in speed. Star Platinum was useless against Yellow Temperus, and against Endul, Jotaro was practically dead if it wasn't for the gum-chewing farting dog. As for being treated as a savior or angel, the Stardust Crusaders did express gratitude towards Jotaro for his wins, but a lot of the time the cast did get on his case for his aloof behavior, especially Joseph Joestar. So if we debunk those aspects of a Mary Sue, why do people consider Jotaro to be one? Well, in my opinion, it has to do with his aloof nature and stoic personality. It's the shonen hero syndrome effect, really. Granted, it's with a big caveat, since we're not really given a chance for our characters to train to overcome their losses. It's something that you see in Naruto, One Piece, Dragon Ball, etc, etc. Granted, Jotaro is a lot different from the main characters in that regard as well. He's a straight up punk, not really all that cheerful all the time, plus he smokes and drinks. Totally a bigger badass in my book. Jotaro in Part 3 isn't a three-dimensional character. He doesn't have his beliefs challenged, he doesn't have to face anything that changes his outlook on life, at least not until the end when most of his friends he made in the last few months were killed off. Now, you can dislike Jotaro all you like, I'm not here to tell you otherwise. I don't have the power to make you guys think the same thing I do. Yet. I can just tell you my own points. You know, it's kind of weird that I started off a video talking about Mary Sue's and my first chapter is about a male character. Yeah, I know. I'm weird, and if you made it this far, type in the comments, Yare Yare Daze. Do you understand?
Lightning. It flashes bright, then fades away.
Video games! Video game characters are a different beast when it comes to writing characters, especially when you're talking about writing tropes. So here's the thing you need to consider when it comes to a video game writing and why it can have a different standard when it comes to it, and that's audience participation. You don't have to be good to watch a movie. You don't have to be good to listen to music. You don't have to be good to read a book. You have to have some modicum of skill to play a game. Well, not from a lack of trying anyway. And here's the thing. A Mary Sue can be a proxy for the author of a story, something for the writer to live vicariously through and as such, have the character lose depth to them. However, in video games, the player character is a proxy for the player, not the writer. Most of the time. However, when you consider it, video games make you, the player, the Mary Sue. It's why a good portion of video game protagonists tend to be either blank slates or silent protagonists. It's a means for people to get immersed into the game and walk a mile in the character's shoes. It's something for the players to get invested in, like Persona 5. You're not watching Joker steal the hearts of people, you are Joker. You're the main character of the story. You get to make the decisions. Now, that isn't to say you can't have the same effect with a voice protagonist, but when it comes to a more narrative-based gaming, it's a little hard to do that since you're not given as much freedom with a narrative. In fact, a lot of games that aren't direct sequels tend to have a lot more constraints and follow the hero's journey a lot more hard. That's not a bad thing, but it's something that you have to give a little leeway when it comes to new IPs. But regardless, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering why the hell I'm using lightning from Final Fantasy XIII.
Yeah. More incident than accident.
Hey! Wait! No, don't leave me!
Let go!
The hell no! You're my only way out of here! No!
Well, sometimes you need to be able to look towards examples that you don't really care for in order to make a point. Like, 13 was probably the nail in the coffin for me to purchase new Final Fantasy games. Not to get too far into it, but the gameplay, the story, and the lack of exploration for it was enough to turn me off from the series. At least until Final Fantasy VII Remake, and even then I got my issues with that. But as I've gotten older and more bored with some of today's titles in gaming, I figured, what the hell, and tried my hand at the games once again, and I still don't like them. Let's put that aside though. From a narrative standpoint, in the original game, Lightning was the main character, but she had her flaws. She is untrustworthy of others, she's very toxic, she quarrels with Snow and Saz, and is shown to not have believed her sister at the time she needed the support of her sibling. In the first game, Lightning is far from what I call a Mary Sue. There's still something that we need to consider before we get to the second game, and that's stoicism. There's a bit of an issue where people correlate stoicism to being unemotional. It's something that the previous example that we talked about, Jotaro Kujo, has levied at him as well. Stoicism does entail that a person does look emotionless, so I can't be too harsh on people for mixing the terms up, but that still doesn't mean they don't have emotions. A character being stoic is just them being a person who can endure the pain or hardship without showing their feelings or complain about it. That's not the same as not having emotions. I do not find it to be a flaw in characters, but I do recognize that others can view it as a flaw, especially when it takes a large amount of screen time for a character. Hell, it's the reason why so many people shat on Squall Leonhardt from Final Fantasy VIII, because he was so closed off and didn't allow himself to connect to anyone until the third disc of that game. There's a reason why the name Emo Git shall live on for eternity.
Betrayal!
Now, if you're talking about the sequels of Final Fantasy XIII, there's actually a case made to be there that Lightning is a Mary Sue. In 13.2, she has obtained otherworldly powers because Lightning suddenly becomes the Chosen One, allowing her to control every Eidolon in existence and granting her limitless potential. Already, you've got something I don't really care for when it comes to character development. I've railed on the concept of the Chosen One aspect in writing multiple times, and how something like that in a story can be used to identify a Mary Sue. It's a big factor in addition to them having a large amount of power granted them as well without any actual training. Then when you get to Lightning Returns, she received a character design to become more appealing to people who were turned off by her. She's seen using multiple weapons that she never really established to have trained with, and essentially being turned to a goddess with no actual flaws with their character and becoming boring. And I know, I just went on a small tangent about how stoicism can be mistaken for emotionlessness, but they essentially just took away Lightning's emotions. Now you have to remember, for context's sake, Lightning slept for about 500 years to get this power. No training, nothing special, it's like, you'll do as my champion, here's some power, bye! Like, you've got a character who becomes a savior of the world who was literally blessed by the gods to do so. You tell me that isn't characteristic of a Mary Sue, and it's boring!
Make it stop!
One could argue that Lightning became more of a mascot and fan service bait too, and in all honesty, it's kind of weird how I can see that actually being a thing. Again, there's a lot of stuff that can be used to make an argument that Lightning is and isn't a Mary Sue character. It comes down to perspective in which game you're going to be looking at. Do I think Lightning is one? Well, certainly not in the first game, and even then, I still don't like her as a character. Hearing her call out her franchise, "I'm no one's slave!" nearly countless times was enough to make me smash my head into the television set.
Great! You owe me a TV.
But I more or less consider her to be very heavily in the camp of being a Mary Sue in the following games. That's the rub of this, isn't it? As stated earlier in the video, the term Mary Sue has been used to label characters that people dislike as them. And Mary Sue is a pretty abrasive and well-known term, but here's the issue. There is no objective standard as to what is and isn't a Mary Sue. I'll talk about this later in the video since this is getting off topic, but know that we'll talk about subjectivity in the last section of this video. For now, I want to talk about how a character can come close to being a Mary Sue, but not really be there. Honestly, part of me isn't over Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and frankly considering some of the videos I've been seeing about it, I'm not the only one. Especially with that cheating Cinderace! Like, you've seen a ton of people talk about what are the best and worst characters, that the champion is the worst that we've seen, that these games aren't worth defending. Hate that last one, by the way. Despite the issues that I myself have expressed with the games, I do think that these are a good step in the right direction for Pokemon, at least in the terms of gameplay mechanics, open world setting, and of course the characters. I've stated this in my own review, but I think that the story aspects of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are the best parts of the game. Granted, they aren't the best in gaming, but I'm not shy about saying that. But for Pokemon games, especially after the last few generations, I can say that this is a cut above the rest, at least in Pokemon terms with their characterization. So, who are we talking about here?
The stage is set. It's my all-out power.
Nemona. Nemona. You know, there seems to be quite a bit of discussion around Nemona, if she's a terrible character, if she's bland, annoying. Me? Well, I think there's a reason why I'm talking about her, and ain't for the fact that some people are equating her to Hisoka. My god, that is just disturbing. Thanks, Internet! But why am I talking about her in this video? Well, internet, that's because Nemona could have easily gone the way of the Mary Sue. Like, in the first time we meet her, we're told that she's a champion level trainer, and the only reason why she's picking the starter that is weaker to yours is because she can most likely kick your ass. She's also incredibly battle crazy. It's like battle, battle, battle. She only has battle for breakfast. To the point where it's really hard not to see Nemona as the Pokemon version of Goku. Watch as comment after comment will appear. I'm saying that Nemona has the grounds to becoming a Mary Sue at the beginning of the game. Hell, even Arvin seems to be annoyed with her at the beginning with how battle crazed she is. Nemona's how you can avoid the Mary Sue status though, with a character that starts like that. I'm not saying that Scarlet and Violet are the gold standard for writing video games. If I'm honest, it's the bare minimum. Still, Nemona has a lot going for her, and she could have easily become a Mary Sue. Like, if Pokemon wasn't terrible at Battle Challenge, where you could easily trounce her if you're at least keeping up with the story levels, but we're not talking about the gameplay standard, we're looking at this through a story and writing perspective. You see, throughout the story, we're shown a fair bit of Nemona's character, and while her skills as a trainer are reinforced by other characters, you're also shown that Nemona's thirst for battle is a little overwhelming to other people. As I already stated, if you take Arvin's reaction to Nemona when you first meet him, he kinda tests her for her battle ability and battle frenzy. Now, this to me is how you avoid making a Mary Sue, or at the very least make the character more believable. It's more tell than show, cause again, fucking Pokemon with its messy battle system! We're told she's a gifted character, but a number of students don't like her because of her skills, but we never see that in battle. While you can talk about how skilled the character is, you still need to show that there are people who don't like the character, because one of the biggest telltale signs of a Mary Sue is to have pretty much everyone view them in a positive light. Even if they happen to be annoying or egotistical, people will instantly ignore that and support them either way. Nemona is constantly forgetting to think about others' feelings, especially when it comes to battling. There were a number of times in the game that she was chastised for trying to battle you while your Pokemon were tired. The world molds around a Mary Sue. It bends to them. And even if they have a tragic past, it doesn't really affect them. I bring this up because in the case of Nemona, later in the story we learn a fair bit more about her. That while she comes from a very wealthy family and her parents are a bit hands-off, literally she says, hands off, but in a good way? Which is very different from how the other two characters, who get the majority of the development in the story, Arvin and Penny, those two seem to have a little bit more of a complicated relationship with their parents, especially Arvin. Oh my god, Arvin, I gotta make a video about you sometime. Like, there's nothing really to explain her battle tendency ways, but at the same time, that's kind of a good thing since there's nothing really special about her. I know that sounds terrible from a character writing, but I'm building up to something here. From what we learn, her skills are all her own, and she didn't use her family's wealth to gain her champion trainer status. Then again, Gita's a terrible champion, so a ham sandwich could beat her. Like, I'm not saying Nemona's a great example of this, but she's not a terrible example either. I still maintain her character is something that a lot of people should look at when they're trying to not make Mary Sues for their characters. Basically giving them flaws, even to the point of making their supposed strength be a character flaw as well. I will say though, post-game, why are we not allowed to battle her real team? We just get a black screen that says, "Oh, you battled Nemona for 2 hours straight. What the hell, Game Freak?"
Do or do not. There is no try. That's a collector's item.
Now you may be wondering why I'm bringing this topic up now. I've talked about it before on my channel years ago, and as I've stated, I stand by my video on the matter. But hear me out. There was something else I want to talk about when it comes to not only the Mary Sue, but also other forms of literary analysis. There's been a trend on the internet for years now that people don't really take in consideration that there's a level of subjectivity to these sorts of topics. You can argue about why a person thinks the way they think, you can debate that they're wrong. There's obviously measures of what people can claim is and isn't a Mary Sue. But that's the interpretation and how people view it that people aren't taking consideration. I can present my own evidence on why Jotaro isn't a Gary Stu, or why I believe lightning does count more as a Mary Sue, and someone out there on the internet will obviously disagree with my analysis. And here's the thing, that's not bad. If anything, I love that aspect of media discussion. I love talking about nerd stuff. People can take away the same information and interpret it differently. I love that. The problem lies that people are willing to claim that they have the answer, that they have the objective truth about these characters and stories. Sure, you can point out information that's overlooked, that is left out, or when people obviously leave things out just to slam a product or piece of media. And if you're interested in said piece of media or have a connection to it, it's fine to be passionate about it. But also, as I said before, this is fiction. This is entertainment. At the end of the day, It's stuff that we enjoy, and we shouldn't be fighting each other over it. If you disagree with me, there's no need to be so harsh on a topic. I'm just a dude on the internet who gives his opinion. Only major difference is that people seem to like what I talk about. By that same token, one thing that I really dislike is herd mentality. I get it. Someone who's very popular makes a claim, and the moment they do, it's spread as fact. Something that I know that I've experienced myself, as I know a few people have used my videos to back up claims of things like how some games suck or how some characters are terrible. It's a side effect of becoming popular, and one that I don't really care for, but there's not much I can really do other than saying that this is my opinion, not fact. The reason I'm including this is just because I think Lightning is a Mary Sue or that Jotaro isn't a Gary Stu. Those are just my opinions and interpretations. They are not fact. And I try my best not to come off as if my thoughts and opinions are fact unless I state otherwise. And even then I try to back it up. And even then I'm still human. I get things wrong. And so long as you're reasonable and not coming at me heatedly, I'm willing to admit I'm wrong about things. The term Mary Sue has become so diluted. In fact, a lot of labels and tropes nowadays have been in the past couple years, whether they be used for fictional people or real ones, and it's a nasty side effect that our internet landscape has created. Sure, you can point to things like Rey from Star Wars, and an argument can be made that she is a Mary Sue, but at this point, those films are in the distant past. Years at this point, and we can't keep going through the same examples again and again. It gets tiresome, especially when there's so much more media to consume out there other than just that. I like to think that despite all the horrible media that is coming out nowadays, we're still evolving. Even the crappy stuff has gotten better over time. Although I do find it hilarious that Neil Druckmann claims that his adaptation of The Last of Us is going to be breaking the video game curse when there's been so many others. I still think that we as people, that our media is evolving. Although, I'm sure that a single YouTuber talking about this isn't going to change anything. Still, I'd like to hear what your guys' thoughts are. Do you think that we've gotten past the dreaded Mary Sues? Has writing nowadays improved? If not, who is a Mary Sue to you and why do you think they are? Let me know in the comments. I'm MangaKamen. Thank you for watching and have a lovely day.